Right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Strategic Planning and Policy Committee meeting for the 5th of August. We just had our Head Start session, which was really good, and now we are moving on to completely new topics. Firstly, I would like to welcome Peter Carr and from our Community Reference Group, and Charlotte Fitzpatrick, the Chair of the Cambridge Community Board, two groups that are very important to our Cambridge Connections item. It's lovely to have you both here. Right, let's move to our apologies, which we have for Councillor Mike Montgomery and Councillor Ian Kamson and Councillor Dean Taylor, all for personal reasons. So if someone could move that, please. Pip, thank you, and Claire, and all in favour? All right, thank you. Disclosure of members' interests. Anything from our agenda today that anyone wishes to declare of an interest? No? Great. And there are no late items. And the confirmation of order of meeting. Claire's happy to move that. In a second, Shane, thank you. All in favour? Please say aye. Great. Okay. Moving on to the confirmation of minutes from our 3rd June meeting. There being no changes to that. Just pop your mic on, Claire, when you're ready. All good.
Sorry, I thought there were just a couple of very minor typos on page 10. Which was the minutes for the 3rd of June. Yeah, on page 10, there's under item 9, Cambridge Connections. The second paragraph, it talks about a community reference group and there's a full stop, but it should be a comma there. That's all. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, being no other ones, we can still move that just subject to those typographical amendments. Are you happy to move that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. Can I have someone second that? Mayor Mike, thank you. All in favour, please say aye. All right, anyone against? No, great, Kerry, thank you. Right, well, let's begin our first item, which is our Cambridge Connections item. And Katie is both GM support and presenting this paper, which is why she's going from one place to the other. And I'll just invite Peter and Charlotte to come and sit up with us. Welcome again to you both. We also have Janine Joyce, I think, which is our project manager, who should be coming online if she's not there soon. And Katie, once you've done your introduction, I'd love to hear from Peter in the first instance. Thank you. Yep. Oh, there she is. Welcome, Janine. Nice to see you.
Hi, good morning, everyone from very chilly Christchurch.
I'll bet. Goodness me. Welcome.
All right. The report today takes us through a series of sort of updates about different sections of the work that are going on today. And so what I suggest is that we'll work our way through the report sort of section by section so that we can have a clear understanding of what work is happening now, what work comes next, and obviously the engagement with our community at each of these phases as well, because otherwise we end up in quite a bit of a muddle about exactly which bit of data and which bit of modelling and which bit of technical something is happening when with whom. So I think that that's hopefully going to be a helpful way of approaching it. But before we get into the report proper, as Joe's already mentioned, the role of the Community Reference Group remains really important as a part of this project. And we've had a number of meetings since our last meeting, the meeting of this committee back in June. And we have another half a dozen already scheduled in between now and the end of the year. And then I've also just continued to provide updates to the Cambridge Community Board as well each month, so that there's an opportunity to make sure that the views of the Community Board and the community at large can be reflected back into the project as well. So yeah, I thought it would be a really good opportunity for you to be able to hear directly from Peter as one of the co-chairs about his view of how the work of the Community Reference Group and the project is going, so you can hear that directly and ask questions directly.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a little bit disadvantaged. For some reason, I've suddenly gone deaf in my left ear. So if I tend to do a bit of this, it's because I want to hear what's going on. So right now, the Cambridge CRG, the reference group, are a wee bit at a crossroads, and that's not a complaint. It's purely an observation, because we are now about to, well, I say now, in the next very few weeks, we'll get a far better understanding of what actually is happening on the roads in, around and through Cambridge, thanks to the modelling work that Janine and her associates are undertaking right now. One of the things we've gleaned from her in the last couple of weeks is that there are a variety, a mix, if you will, of models, of which the Waikato Regional Transport Model is but a part. And some of us would have thought, I think, the WRTM was it, but it isn't. It is part of a far wider mix. And we now know that the project management team are grappling with this mix now to try and give us a clear picture of what's going on. The second thing is we're starting to look forward to, and perhaps are a little frustrated by, the fact that we have to get out there, and all of us have to get out there and interface with the public, because they're waiting for more feedback. There's been a great silence. It's nobody's fault. You can't tell them half a picture. We can't tell them a fuller picture until this work that is now underway lands during the month of August and lands in total 26. Katie, am I right? On the 26th of August to you folk here in this room. So those are the two things, is the facts. What are the, well, three things really. What do the facts lead us to? And how and what are we going to tell the public to get their feedback, remembering the 758 people put forward about 1,500 views, some of them obviously duplicating, in good faith, and they want some clean answers. So we're in good heart. We're happy. We're very, very happy now that Janine is on board and is giving us very, very clear advice. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Peter. Oh, Peter, are you happy to take a few questions from the table?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, we'll start with Roger.
You might have to yell at me a bit.
It's
No,
okay.
no, I won't yell at you,
I know you do.
but it's a question, and the documents that we've seen, particularly the Becker proposal, suggests that there is a reliance on the WRTM. Now, I've raised this because, and I've spoken with Katie about it, I have concerns that the WRTM is not an appropriate model for the looking at specific challenges on streets that we see within the problem of Cambridge and the congestion, etc. So I'd really like Katie just to tell us what other models or techniques are being used to assess what the
Yep.
solution is. Okay, I'd hate to see the reliance on WRTM.
And no, there isn't a sole reliance on the WRTM. And only last Thursday, our education was much broader when we heard from Janine, who's sitting on the screen there, as to the other models. And I'd be very happy to swing to her to give you a better and more professional overview of modelling.
So can I suggest that we've put together about half a dozen slides, and one of them is exactly on the Waikato Regional Transport Model, and what else supplements that. And so we, if you're happy that we then, when we get to this point, that we run through the PowerPoint and then we deal to this issue, because it's a very common question and it's absolutely the right one.
And I just reflect back on 2021, when we did the review of our transport strategy. And actually at the time, we raised quite a number of errors in the WTRM, which have subsequently shown to be correct from our point of view. Yeah.
Good point, Roger. Pip, is your question for Peter particularly?
Sort of broadly, I just want to say that, previously under Cambridge Connections, there was discussion at the time as to whether or not we were coming out of COVID and were they reflective of sort of what was reality. I'll be interested in the more technical section as to sort of how we're going to collect the data. But my only request is to make sure that we actually, the data points are real, there's some real credibility to them. And also when we take them to the community actually believes them, because previously when we went through Cambridge Connections phase 1, unfortunately, the data was not necessarily believable.
Thanks, Pip. Great. Katie, I'll come back to you, and perhaps Janine will speak to that when we get to that point in the slides. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Zoe, are you able to put up the slides? I think it's probably good for us to run through this. And I'm actually going to hand to Janine, and then hopefully, yes, you can still see her down the bottom here, to work us through a couple of slides, but just to give a sense of what we'll do, which will take us through quite a lot of the report here, and then we can come to the specific sections where we're asking for feedback. So we'll just, again, the slides tune you into where we are now. They talk about the work specifically that's underway, including sort of issues around modelling and data. And then give you a foretaste of what we will cover at the meeting at the end of the month, because today's meeting really helps guide what we will bring back to at the end of the month. And as Peter says, we're partway through. We're just receiving the early draft of the technical work that's going on. Feedback from you here helps make sure that we then complete that work and bring it to you on the 26th in a way that you're then able to see the whole picture. So there's kind of hurry up and wait for us as well, that we're really keen to actually get to the end of the month and make sure that that's all pulled together. So hand over to you, Janine. So by way of introduction, Janine, I know that I've introduced you to the project governance group, but not to the rest of you. So Janine Joyce has joined us as the project manager for Cambridge Connections. She is working for us part-time all the way till the end of the project at the end of this year. Janine has extensive experience after working at NZTA. She now runs her own consultancy, and one of the many strengths and benefits of having Janine as our project manager for this work is that she's also undertaking the strategic transport planning, which is the methodology that we're using here for 2 pieces of work for NZTA. So she's extremely familiar with the process itself, with what NZTA requires, and there's some learnings because NZTA is a bit further ahead with some of the work about how we then might apply that to our kind of work. And it's been great. Peter's mentioned the fact that Janine can bring a really strong both project management discipline, but also that transport knowledge, and marry the two in the project. So we're really lucky to have her here. So over to you, Janine, to be able to run us through these slides, and I'll just interject, or we can pause to take questions because it might be hard for you to see the room. So if we can just do that if there are questions as we go. Thanks.
Awesome. Kia ora koutou. Thanks, Katie. So I'll get into the slides, but yeah, just happy if you just chip in if you've got any questions. I think there's about 5 or 6 slides. So if we can just go to the first one, please. Thank you. So just thought it was really good for us just to orientate where we are on the project right now. So obviously there's been a huge amount of work done to date, and lots of discussions with the community, with all our community groups, our reference group, and with elected members. And so where we'd got to before we started this current phase is obviously we'd identified a lot of the issues. We'd gone out and worked a lot with the community and gathered lots of ideas, and then we'd started to develop the options in the themed long list, as well as working really closely with everything else that's going on in the council around the strategic framework and your multi-criteria assessment work that we're discussing today. Where we are at the moment is when you look at a strategic transport plan, it's really important that not only do you understand what the current network is, so what is the 2025 network needing to do, but also what is the future network needing to do. So we look at that in a 30-year horizon. So we're looking out to 2055 and saying, where are we now? Where do we want to be in 30 years' time? And then that informs the development of the draft transport plan, which is about, well, how are we going to get there? So at the moment, we are developing what we call the Strategic Transport Network Review. So that's the piece of work that Becca is undertaking with us, where it does define the current and future transport networks using NZTA's One Network framework, which the team, the Waipa Transport team, have been using for many years in terms of the current framework. We obviously have undertaken further consideration and modelling of the bridge options, and that came out of the direction from the 3rd of June SPNP meeting. So we now have all of that modelling work complete, and we are starting to bring that all into the Strategic Transport Network Review. We also are going to have a discussion today and agree the approach to completing the multi-criteria assessment for stage 1 of this part of that assessment that then informs the draft transport plan. We have also got a team on board, so we have got a consultant team on board. The contract is currently being worked through, and they will be developing the transport plan for us from August to December. And we are also going to be commencing a technical scope, which I will talk a little bit more through in terms of that future bridge corridor and the steps we need to take to achieve protecting that corridor. Where we're heading and where a lot of those touch points with the community come again is obviously we've got today. We then bring the Strategic Transport Network Review to you on the 26th, and then we load into obviously the development of the draft transport plan if that is Council's direction. And there will be a number of touch points with the community throughout August and September on that emerging work. What's the Strategic Transport Network Review telling us? What did the modelling tell us? What did all the other pieces of information tell us? Bringing that all together, and then obviously back to the 7th of October SPNP committee to, if you decide to adopt the draft for consultation, and then we head out again for formal public consultation in October, November, with a plan to complete the transport plan by December this year. So I might just do a little bit, if I can move to the next slide. So just today, what we're going to do today is give you a bit of an update on in the report on where we're up to on all the technical work streams. So obviously there's stuff in there around the Strategic Transport Network Review, which is nearing completion. We have seen the early draft. We had a technical team meeting this morning on that early draft, and we hopefully will be getting a final draft by early next week to start then getting ready for obviously the report and the agenda for the 26th of August SPNP. We have completed the phase 1 modelling of the bridge corridor options, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that. And then obviously the MCA, and there is also information in the report today on the comms and engagement approach for stage 3. While we've been going through the Strategic Transport Network Review and obviously discussions we've also had with yourselves, there obviously has been a need for us to really clearly understand the technical scope of work that goes alongside the draft transport plan about a future bridge corridor for Cambridge. So if we can just move to the next slide, please. So what we're doing is we are currently in discussions with a consultancy firm to undertake a technical scope. Now, this will run in parallel with the development of the draft transport plan. So it will form a core work stream of that transport plan, and they will be closely linked to the consultant team that will be doing that, and obviously to the project team that is currently running under Cambridge Connections. So what we want to do and what we're going to be doing with this technical scope is developing a high-level implementation plan for protecting a preferred future bridge corridor. So when it's decided what in essence would be the preference for that corridor, this high-level plan will articulate the key steps and technical engineering reports and studies that would need to be undertaken to move to a designation pathway for a future bridge corridor. It will also highlight at a high level tackle the strategic risks, the constraints, with being able to do that, which will also help us make decisions on a preferred corridor. And it will also give a high-level program and a budget, indicative 3-year budget, to include in Council's next development of its long-term plan. So there is currently money in the long-term plan to undertake a designation pathway for a preferred bridge corridor, but this is actually putting more technical evidence and information in behind that, and to also support elected members to make a decision as we come to the draft transport plan in October about a preferred corridor and protecting a future corridor for Cambridge. So that piece of work is kicking off. We've got an initial meeting tomorrow, and then that piece of work will commence, and it will be developed alongside the draft transport plan over the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Should we just pause there for a moment? The next couple of slides start to talk about the regional transport model and data. So before we change tack, do we have questions or comments either about this piece of work that we are undertaking to protect the corridor, so that we really do, as elected members, you've said how important it is to try to get to designation as quickly as possible. So making sure that we really understand what those steps are, what it will cost, to make sure that that can be considered in the long-term plan is something that I think gives this elected members certainty about that. So questions about this or the previous slide about the work that's underway?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. The perfect time to have a little pause. Claire.
Yes, thanks. Really excited to see, the detail coming through now. I had a question about the additional multi-criteria analysis, or I suppose technical criteria that have been, so is this the right time to ask that question? It's for the weighting of the various options within the transport plan. So
let's do that. Zoe, would you mind just stopping sharing the screen so that Janine can see the room more easily and vice versa? So yes, in the recommendations, what we are asking is to improve the inclusion of 2 additional technical criteria to this phase of the multi-criteria assessment. And I'll just find which page we're on here. Here we are. So the 2 additional criteria are there on page 26 and diligent, with the rest of the criteria on page 25. So perhaps, Janine, you could just give people an understanding of why the request is there for additional criteria. And also the second part of questions that I've had just before the meeting was also, would these criteria be applied just for this stage of the assessment, or do they carry forward into later phases of the project?
So a very good question. So the project team's position on recommending and the addition of these 2 technical criteria is actually to give effect to the strategic transport network review that we've just undertaken. So at the moment, you have strategic criteria, and which is really important across your investment objectives, value for money, feasibility and consentability, and social and environmental impacts. But what the criteria doesn't look at is actually about what we call the right mode on the right road at the right time. And so what those two additional criteria allow us to do is it actually looks at the current network, of what the functions of the current strategic network are, what the future network needs to look like in 30 years' time. And then when you're looking at all of those different transport activities, we're able to say, if you put this activity in this place, in this time frame, is that does that suit the role and function that that road or that place needs to play in the future? So it helps us really make good decisions, especially in the short term, about what you put into the network in the short term that is enduring or sustainable over the long term. So we can put investments in the short term, but also making sure that over the next 10 years, whatever the activity we put in that place in the network is actually going to support us moving to the future network over 30 years. So it helps us make really good decisions about where things go. And so an example of that would be, if you have a very big movement corridor, so you're going to have a lot of your traffic and your through traffic on your movement corridor, that's not really an appropriate place for us to be putting a lot of walking and cycling. Things like putting a lot of speed humps, slowing down mechanisms, things like that. So it's just making sure that at the moment, transport activities come out based on their strategic ranking. What these two things do is help us think about place. I think there was also a question of does it have an issue in terms of timing now or timing for later? It's actually about across the whole 30 years. So an example would be that it doesn't have any issue with anything that would happen in the short term. Like, it doesn't disadvantage anything that we would be looking at in the short term. But what it makes sure is that whatever we put in the short term is enduring. So that money we spend in the first 1 to 3 years is money well spent, because we optimize that over the next 5 or 10 years. We don't put something in years 1 to 3, and then in years 5 to 10 we rip it out and put something else in. So that's what that criteria helps us do. It helps us think about the future and that we put the right activity in the right part of the network to address all the different challenges that we've got.
That sounds great, Janine. I like that thinking. I was worried that there might be some short-term things that we'd like to see investment that just to relieve pressures, I guess, that might not really align that well with maybe the strategic plan overall, but that it would really help the community now. And so I'm just hoping that the balance will be able to be achieved so that what I wanted to avoid was that only short-term interventions are going to be supported if it fits with the long-term framework, the long-term blueprint. And yet there might be a good case to say, well, actually, it really makes sense to do this just because it's going to help with these particularly acute problems that we've got. Yeah. So I appreciate that there's only 2 criteria out of 14 that are strategic ones. But it was good to just get a bit of assurance from you about how that kind of scenario would be handled.
It would always come down to, obviously, it'll be elected members' decisions about what they choose to invest in over the 30 years. I think what the plan would be able to show is that by investing in that activity in that place, whether or not we felt that there may need to be a change in the future, and therefore what you invest in the short term may need to be changed in the medium term. And so it just comes down to that optimization of your investment over the long term. But it definitely doesn't change any way that elected members would make decisions on their preferred transport menus of choice.
Thanks, Janine. I've got Les and then Shane.
I'm just wondering about any decisions made by councillors here and how it's going to affect the amalgamations. I just wonder if there's been any talk amongst the councils and that if these are worthwhile doing.
That might be one for you, Katie.
I think I'll answer by saying that just as the elected members have discussed when we've been talking about the long-term plan, it's actually really important from my perspective that for the long-term plan, and the same with Cambridge Connections, that we complete this work so we actually understand what is the right thing to do and what does our community actually want and expect. Waipā District Council will start that work, and then we will hand that on to whatever organisation comes next. But then at least we will be well positioned to be able to hand it on to the next organisation, and they will be able to then take all of those components from the long-term plan, which have been informed by a 30-year plan, to actually then balance that and make the trade-offs that they'll be making within the new organisation. I think what we have certainly found in the work that I was doing when I was at NZTA, you recognise that there with the central government where you've got change all the time, if you have a long-term plan, it is far more likely that initiatives from the plan get chosen rather than something else, and that you then end up with a pathway over time to get there, and that it sets you up really, really well to do so.
Thank you. Shane.
I'm concerned about costs. I'm concerned about, is this a must do or is it a nice to have, these extra 2 criteria? In other words, does NZTA require this in terms of their funding? And, you know, I'm sure that Becca would be delighted to do this consulting work, but at what cost?
Yeah, so obviously the MCA at the moment is complete, and part of the Strategic Transport Network review is to peer review that. So they will already be doing that under their current contract, as well as if we include these 2 technical criteria, that will also be undertaken under current contract. It is not a big piece of work to do an assessment. It's against the themed long list, and really you're starting to look through and just doing an outline of whether or not that activity is sitting in the right place. The thing I would raise about NZTA is obviously the One Network framework, which classifies all of your roads and gives them a role and a function. They do expect that any transport plan or program of works coming forward is giving effect to that One Network framework, and this is the way that we are able to clearly show that we have thought about place and movement now and in 30 years to identify the optimal mix of investment choices that will be included in the program. So that's what those 2 criteria help us to do. It helps us to line up with that current and future network position, which is a core part of NZTA's strategic transport planning approach. But it's no additional cost to the project. It will be under current budget with Becca, and it will be completed by next week.
Thank you. Roger.
Yes, thank you, Jo. I agree with the inclusion of these 2 extra factors to be taken into consideration for the multi-criteria assessment. However, I question how we're going to apply those to current decisions that are apparently being made that are outside of Cambridge connections. As an example, our public transport projection is on the technical document 2 that actually specifies a preferred option, which to my mind, that preferred option is contrary to our 30-year plan of public transport inclusion in terms of the long-term goal of providing strong public transport for Cambridge. So how do we go back and influence that public transport decision using the multi-criteria assessment?
That's another really good question. So what I would say is it's not just the MCA that will help you do that. It's actually the Strategic Transport Network Review. And we actually had this discussion this morning about public transport, aware that obviously you've got a further workshop to give us direction on the 12th of August. So what the Strategic Transport Network Review is, it looks at 30 years ahead, and it does look at what is the role of other modes of moving people and goods. So what's the role of public transport? What is the role of walking and cycling? We do outline what is the current network and what would be the planned network, but what we can also do is say, and this would be the proposed approach strategically of where we think the role of public transport plays a really important role in our network, and we can identify things such as connections to growth areas, connections to our employment zones such as Hautapu, connections to other parts of Cambridge's network. So absolutely the Strategic Transport Network Review will do that. And we'll take direction from you in terms of those things. And what you can then do is use that to influence back into the Regional Council and NZTA to say, well, that's a great first step in terms of public transport, but here's all the other steps that we would like to you to co-invest with us on over the next 10, 20 years. And so we use the Strategic Network Review to be your evidence base to do that.
Because what worries me, and it's the first part of the report that we considered, and it says we received an update on the Waikato Regional Council Cambridge Local Service Assessment Technical Report to, what a long title, for options for a Cambridge local public transport service, and yet they specify what the preferred option is, which implies that we have already accepted that preferred option within our strategic transport plan. And that worries me.
So can I just respond to that first, Janine? I think two things. I think that's why we were deliberate to say you had received the report rather than doing more than that. I think just to give you comfort that at a staff level, we have been communicating regularly with regional council staff about the status of the report, the desire from elected members, and our expectation that you would have an involvement in being able to consider the outcomes of that technical report, and the workshop next week is one of those steps to rectify the situation.
So I get the assurance it's not a fait accompli.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely not.
and also we've also noted with Becca in the review we're doing at the moment that any direction that comes out of the 12th of August elected member workshop will be reflected in the Strategic Transport Network review.
Thank you.
Right, if there's no further questions, we'll come back to you, Janine, to carry on. Thank you.
Right, I think we're going to have a chat about the model. Yeah, can we just go one? Yep, that one. So just what I thought would be useful just for context for people that aren't across exactly what WRTM is. So obviously WRTM is the Waikato Regional Transport Model. It is the model that is agreed with all partners in terms of doing transport modelling in the Waikato region, and that includes your local government partners and NZTA. But I did just want to explain, I guess, when you have a strategic model at this scale, just the limitations that poses. And obviously there's a lot of discussion from the community, from the CRG, and obviously from yourselves about the concerns around the outputs that come out of WRTM, which are completely valid because it is a very, very large scale strategic model. So WRTM actually, even though it's called a Waikato model, it is actually a pan-regional model. So as you can see there, the model actually includes roading networks and data and information and all of that good stuff that goes into that big software program, predominantly of half of the Upper North Island. So it has all of South Auckland, it has all of the Coromandel, all of the Waikato region, and quite a lot of the Tauranga and Western Bay of Plenty sub-region. And what that little red dot on the spider web on the left-hand side then is that's Cambridge. And then when you look at what we then blow up and start to think about how we're testing some of the bridge corridor options within that model, those are those other little 4 points that we're looking at. So when you think about those 4 points sitting inside that 1 point, inside that pan-regional software system, that does give you a bit of an idea of the limitations that WRTM has to be a one source of the truth when you make decisions on transport. So if I can just go to the next slide. So I just want to assure you, we do not use WRTM as a decision maker. We do not use WRTM as a primary source of the truth. WRTM is just one input that we use when we make strategic transport decisions. The thing that WRTM is really good at is it actually allows us to test different scenarios or different changes in the network and what that might do to the rest of the network, because it's using exactly the same data and exactly the same processes to run those scenarios. So it gives us a good sketch or a good outline of what might happen to the network over 30 years if we put a bridge here, if we put a bridge here, if we put more capacity on an existing bridge here, if we put ramps at T-Rail Road. So what it actually does is it allows us to test different scenarios and think about what that may do to the network over the next 30 years. That's what we use it to do. So it's a pan-regional model. It is also a 3-stage model. And what we mean by that is it primarily looks at road network performance. So it looks at trip generation, looks at trip destination and origin, and it looks at how that is then distributed across the network. It is not a 4-stage model like what they have over in Tauranga, which can do all multimodal activities, including rail. WRTM at the moment is a 3-stage model, and therefore it doesn't assess the role of public transport, walking and cycling, and future impacts, good and bad, these may have in terms of performance on the road network as we get further growth in travel demand. So it definitely has its limitations. What we do is we use that outputs, and they are outputs that are completely agreed with NZTA, but all of us understand that there are limitations, and there are quite limitations in the way it forecasts traffic volumes in 30 years. And the reason for that is because it's not just forecasting thinking about Cambridge. It is thinking about trip generation distribution in the entire pan region to come up with a number in our little dots, inside a little dot inside that pan region. That is why the model has limitations in terms of future traffic volumes, and we know that. So what we do at the same time is we have 20 years of what we call annual average daily traffic counts. So we now have 20 years of data that traffic counts all different parts of your strategic network, and we know what those traffic counts have been every year for 20 years. We also know what that historical growth then looks like over that 20 years, and we also line that up with what has happened with urban growth. So what's happened with your residential and industrial growth, what's happened with traffic demand increases or heavy vehicle increases, and we have all that data as well. So, and we also have got 2025 TomTom trip data. So that's a lot of how trucks are moving, which ways they go, where they're getting snarl up in network performance and things like that. And then we also use the WRTM strategic model outputs. And on top of that, we also have a team that comes with Invise, Becca, myself, and the Waipa transport team. So lots of technical and professional experience in dealing with strategic transport planning. So I just thought it'd be worth just showing. We definitely know there are limitations with WRTM, especially in the forecast traffic counts. We will be addressing that through the Strategic Transport Network Review. But what I would also still premise is forecasting forward is always an assumption. It is always a guesstimate. It will always be wrong. So we have to do the best we can at this point in time with all of those different bits of data and our professional knowledge to think about what could happen over 30 years. But what we do is then we continue to monitor that every year. Is growth tracking the same as what we thought our assumption is? Is traffic demand tracking the same as what we thought our assumption is? Is the congestion tracking how we thought it was? And if it's not, why isn't it? So even though there will be numbers in the Strategic Transport Network Review, as professional judgment that we feel this could roughly be what we think it could look like in 30 years' time, that is continually monitored and reviewed as you move through the implementation of your transport plan.
Thanks, Janine. That's a good place to pause. We've got a couple of questions in the room, and perhaps just before we come to that, just welcome Phil Mackay, who's just joined online, who's the other Community Reference Group co-chair alongside Peter.
Marcus.
Yeah, my question is, what do you mean by TomTom trip data? Like, what's the definition of that? Because that seems to be an odd term to use these days.
Yeah, so obviously a number of our freight industry and our transport operators, they all are linked to TomTom. And so what that means is every trip that they're taking, it is gathered into the TomTom system, and then we are able to gather that information predominantly out of NZTA. So we're able to actually have data from 2025 of how heavy vehicles and trucks are moving around the Cambridge network. So it just gives us another good piece of information, specifically looking at heavy vehicles and how they're moving in the network, where they're going, and the different journeys that they take crossing the Cambridge network. So
Does it
is,
also link into like E-road data and stuff like that, or GPS, or is it just
Yeah,
the TomTom network?
Yeah, so in my understanding, it is that one links to the TomTom network, but they do also, a number of them are also obviously connected to E-roads, which we also can access through NZTA, and also all linked to the GPS. So it's very similar to E-roads. It's just we find TomTom can give us quite specific trip journeys, a lot more than what E-road data gives us.
Thanks, Janine. Roger and then Pip.
Yeah, thank you very much. Two parts to this question, if I may. The first is a broad picture. One of the things that WRTM does not do is predict human behavior.
Correct.
And that would be the most difficult aspect, especially when you're trying to predict what's going to happen in 30 years, when modes of transport will probably have changed as well. But the second part, so what are we doing about that? And the second part is that Becker proposal only mentions the WRTM, and yet their report is going to be a critical part of this strategic network planning. What access do they have to those other 6 aspects of information and data to actually incorporate in the consideration of their report?
Yep. So Becker are part. We run as a one project team approach. So Becker are part of the Cambridge Connections project team at the moment. So even though in their proposal that they put in before they joined, they primarily mention WRTM, they are actually the ones that have now got all of this data and working through all of this data. So the Strategic Transport Network Review is being informed and will be developed based on all of this data, including everything else that we all bring to the table as part of our delivery. And sorry, can you just remind me about your question 1?
Human behavior. And as an example to that, if we go back to that 2021, that report that was produced said there would be minimal increase in the Norfolk Drive traffic from the Victoria Street lights. And we know that now that is a considerable rat run that was never incorporated. And that's an example of human behavior reacting to a particular pressure of the network at the time. So how are we incorporating consideration of that?
Yeah. I mean, look, human behavior is probably, one of the most critical things when it comes to decision making on the journey you're going to take. And so we can't predict exactly what people are going to do, but what we do, and it comes back to those 2 additional technical criteria, is we have to clearly think about the role and the function of each part of our strategic network. Not every road in the network, but the parts of the network that carry the majority of our trips, and therefore we invest appropriately, that we deliver that experience to achieve that function. And what I mean by that is, if we have got people rat running into parts of the network where we don't want them rat running, then we need to be investing in improvements or changes to that network to discourage that behavior. I mean, you can never stop people deciding where they're going to go, but implementing your strategic network's roles and functions is about encouraging people to get on the right road, on the right mode. And so if they want to be in a truck, then they need to have an easy, efficient, straightforward journey. If they want to be on a bike, then it needs to be safe, low speed, possibly separated. There's things like that. And by designing and improving those roads to deliver those strategic functions, it hopefully encourages human behavior to be on the right roads.
Thank you. That's encouraging.
Thanks, Janine. Pip.
Thank you for the explanation with regard to the WRTM model being at a macro level. and I'm relatively new to this, but I have been shown some numbers which at a micro level, like for example, at an individual location and, place around Cambridge, that the difference between actual, traffic movement versus the WTRM traffic movement is as much as 60 and 70% out. That sort of as a to me demonstrates a confidence problem if people are saying, hey, they're using the WRTM model, and do we just sort of make a policy decision that we at a micro level we don't use, because I think we will ultimately get down to individual intersections, locations, etc. And if the micro data from the WTRM is, blatantly inaccurate, why don't we just not use it at a micro level?
Yeah.
So
So there's two things that we'll be doing with, oh, sorry, Katie, did you want me to?
I know, I was just going, before we sort of launch too far forward, that's absolutely recognised by the team. And when we get to the next slide and talk about the work that will happen in the next phase, then Janine can talk about what model we will use, which is appropriate for a much more detailed approach for exactly what you're picking up about individual intersections.
I
Can I just
probably,
quickly check in? Sorry, Janine, I just want to check in with how we're going with timing, because we're almost an hour into this item. I don't want to lose too much time. I want to make sure we're focusing on those two new criteria, our decision point. So are you happy with how we're tracking time-wise?
Yes, I am. I guess that's why I was sort of hoping that we can just sort of round this one out soon, because I would like to give you a sense of what's coming up, and that includes the comms and engagement aspect of that, because that's the second thing that we're also seeking feedback on to make sure that we haven't missed that. So that would be good.
Sorry, Janine, carry on.
yeah, that's right. I was just going to add that one thing we do to look at those future model outputs is we use that 20-year AADT data that we've got now, and we look at all the annual growth that's happened with your urban growth and what's that meant to trip demand growth, and then we project that forward as well. We've also gone back into the model and we've looked at the numbers that they had in 2018 and then projected that forward with the numbers they have in 2055, and then looked at the percentages that they've had. So we use the model outputs in multiple ways to be able to have a position on future traffic growth that we feel is plausible, which will be in the Strategic Transport Network Review. But we also have the model outputs as a technical appendice so that people understand that there was that work undertaken. But the future traffic numbers you will see in the Strategic Transport Network Review will not be what the model has said.
And that perhaps leads us nicely onto the work that we're doing between now and the 26th. So this is our last slide here, and then we'll be able to pause, just making sure that we've answered any questions about the criteria. And then we've got Jane Thompson in the room, who's leading our comms and engagement work, who'll be able to respond to questions or comments you've got about the comms and engagement plan, in addition to the work that obviously Brian and Rachel and others continue to do in the project.
Yeah, so what's coming on the 26th of August SPNP is the completed Strategic Transport Network Review. So that will be the full technical report, and inside that it will also have the technical summary of the bridge corridor options that were considered and modelled, and including obviously all of the technical appendices in terms of the model outputs, the ONF classification and things like that. We will also be bringing the completed MCA, noting though that the MCA carries on. So as we start to develop the draft transport plan, if there are other transport activities that are not currently on the themed long list MCA, and they are a good option to be bringing to the table, then they will also be put through the MCA. So they are all assessed against the same criteria. We will also bring you an update on what the technical scope progress is in terms of that plan for protecting the preferred future bridge corridor, and there'll be further detail on the comms and engagement steps for stage 3. Just in terms of the modelling, so as we move into the draft transport plan phase, there may be some parts of Wortham that we want to go back and double check. But when we do specific intersection or road assessments and trying to understand how things at one intersection could affect another intersection, we use a different model called SIDRA, which is actually a specific intersection designed model. So it does have similar base information and things, but what we're able to do is actually test that at an intersection level for Cambridge. So we will also, if required, look to use a SIDRA modelling approach if we need further detail on specific network connections, intersections, etc.
So before we move to the comms and engagement with Jane, can I just check if there are any other questions or points for clarification that would support you being able to make a decision about the 2 additional criteria, which is the one decision, or anything else around that methodology? And then if not, we'll move to comms and engagement. Okay, sounds great. And so in the report, we've included as an appendice the draft comms and engagement approach for this next phase. And Jane's been working that up both for this phase and then stepping that out, obviously, to the end of the year. And in less detail as it gets you to the end of the year, because it obviously depends on each decision point along the way. But it does mean a consistent approach, thinking about the way we use both our engagement with the Ideas Forum, with the community at large, with specific stakeholder groups, and we continue to work with our iwi partners in parallel. So you won't see that reflected so directly in the comms and engagement approach, just as we've been taking that whole work. So perhaps it would probably be best to take the sort of plan as read, but take some comments and questions, because I know there are at least a couple around the room.
I'll just start from one of mine, actually. It's actually come from Councillor Kempson, who just saw an inconsistency with the report recommending not weighting the MCA criteria, but then the communications plan talked about weighting. So that was a good pickup from him.
When I developed that part of the plan, or that stage of the plan, we were still deciding that weighting and how it would work today. So one thing with comms and engagement plans is they change quite regularly as things evolve, and that was one of those situations. So I'm well aware it is in a different way than what today is, and we will make a note on that plan that it will be changed.
Great, thank you, Jane. Claire.
Well picked up.
Yes, just a couple of things. The first one was around the MCA. It didn't actually specify in the comms engagement plan where that would be communicated to the community in any detail, like the scores for the various scenarios or options. And I'm really keen that it is part of the communication so that the community can see the long list and then, well, the top scoring ones and what scores they got, and
Yes.
and particularly for the how they scored across the criteria. I think it's really important.
Yes. and
Yeah, to bring our
what we have
community
been
along.
focusing on in the last month or so is actually having that clearly outlined, and on the website we've done quite a bit of work to improve that so it's easily read, and decide, whether you decide those extra criteria go in or not is going to be a focus. So if it does go ahead, we will explain that, and as things evolve, that will develop more.
Yeah, oh, that's great. And the last question I had was that I think it's important that newspapers do continue to be used.
Yes.
I appreciate that you're doing great work, like with the website and the online stuff and social media and things like that, but I am getting consistent feedback from people that some of them just aren't in that space for the online stuff. And so I would hope that at least some newspaper coverage can continue.
No, definitely newspaper coverage is important. We have the media releases and things like that, but there's also a regular space that we take out for the council to have updates and things. When we get to the consultation stage, there will be a lot more newspaper adverts there over the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks, probably not quite as much as in that consultation phase. Thank you.
Roger.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I agree with the concept. It's critical that the community are brought along with us, and communications is so much part of that. And you may not be able to answer this now, but is it possible, Katie, to please have an update on where we are in terms of the total cost and budget, cost versus budget of the Cambridge Connections programme? Because there was a budget set initially. I just have a feeling that we may be kind of stepping over what that.
Do you want to come
Budget
back to that,
was.
Katie, and we'll carry on with comms and
I'll,
engagement? or
I'll
up to
certainly be
you?
able to respond. I'll be able to respond after this meeting. I can't off the top of my head,
I'm
but
not
I
asking you,
absolutely will report
but
back to
yeah,
elected members.
if you could.
Charlotte.
So the comms and engagement plan seems to have a bit of emphasis on sharing, which is great. But what are the expectations of us around capturing feedback that we receive once you've shared those messages? And what sort of listening and monitoring tools do you have in place to make sure that we get a really good understanding of what people are saying, thinking, feeling?
I always knew you'd have a good question for that, Charlotte. To tell you the truth, I've been scrabbling a bit this week to get that stuff done because I had a bereavement in our family. But we want to encourage as much as we possibly can in the next 3 weeks, just to sort of sense check where we're up to. And we will have a system in place that makes that easy to monitor and assess. And we will develop the FAQs on the website as things come up, if we're getting repeated questions, that sort of thing. So a little bit more work to do on that one.
And perhaps I'll just add a couple of things that I'm building on the way that we have approached it in previous phases of the project. So what we do have is a Cambridge Connections email address, which is monitored every day so that we're able to triage and take that feedback into a central place. The same with that kind of email feedback that might come in to me or to other members of the team. What we used last time when we went and asked people, well, what were the problems? What did they think those ideas were? We've obviously captured that through our sort of submission process, and it does mean we're then able to actually assess and theme up ideas and play that back, and that's what you've seen reported back to you last time. And so we'll certainly anticipate still doing that, and we're really conscious that, as you say, making sure that we understand what the community is thinking, feeding that into the project itself and being able to bring that directly to elected members so that they're directly aware as well as their own connections becomes really important and to support the decision making, because it's not, elected members are not making a decision just on technical information. It is obviously on community views as well.
Katie, I'll just whip to Lisa here for some extra input.
Sorry, I'll just add that we also use iCenture as our media monitoring tool, and we use that to monitor community sentiment over both media and social media. We also have upgraded our CRM system, which now allows us to monitor community sentiment through any CRMs we receive or emails. So that will be helping to inform Jane in her work as well.
Thanks, Lisa. Right, any further questions for Jane on comms and engagement in particular, or Jane, you're happy to carry on if you need to?
If that's the feedback, that's really useful. Thank you. We'll be updating, kind of, as you say, particularly the reference to waiting, picking up on the work that's going on in the next few weeks. So from our point of view, I think if you're happy, then we'd like to just move to the recommendations and be able to seek feedback, particularly specifically about an agreement around inclusion of these recommended additional 2 criteria, and then that's us for the day.
Before we go there, Councillor Kempson had one more question that I wanted to bring to you, which was in the Becker letter, there are a couple of sections missing. He assumed they would be for privacy reasons, fees, etc. Can you just comment on that?
Yes, that's absolutely right. So we've removed a couple of commercially sensitive sections of the contract.
Great, thank you. Any further questions at all before we move to the recommendations? Claire?
Oh, yes, thank you. So it's about that Becker letter. There was a mention in it about gap waiting. Yeah, that was on page 38 of our agenda. It says stage 3. We can see where interventions will address critical gaps and possible gap weighting to the option evaluation. So that wasn't part of the MCA, I don't think, was it? So I just.
No, what they're actually meaning there is that when we look at the current network and then we look at the future network, they will identify where there are changes, and therefore there could be gaps in terms of how we could improve or move towards that strategic function over 30 years. And we need to think about options that need to be brought in to be assessed to address those gaps in the network. That's what they're meaning there.
That sounds really good, actually. So I'm glad I asked the question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Right, let's move to our recommendations, which are that we're going to receive Katie's report on Cambridge Connections phase 3 technical work. We're going to approve the inclusion of those 2 extra technical criteria to the multi-criteria assessment to support assessment against the strategic transport network review. And we're going to provide feedback on any additional communications and engagement activity on stage 3. Oh, Dalmarie's going to move. Excellent. Can I have a second, please? Mayor Mike. Great. All in favour? Great. Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Janine, Jane, Peter and Charlotte. Really appreciate you being here with us.
Thanks,
Now,
everyone.
Katie, before you move, we are a little bit ahead of time. Are you happy to do our anchor institutions item now and then we can break for lunch? Are you happy for that? Okay, great. Give you just a moment. Great, thank you for that, Katie. I appreciate that. Right, so this is our Anchor Institutions annual report. It's on page 93 of Diligent.
All right, so we're on page 92 in Diligent. So the Anchor Institution report is here. The Anchor Institution framework was adopted by Council a couple of years ago, and since that time, what we've been doing is having an annual implementation plan. So we've just concluded the second year of the implementation plan, and we have been reporting to elected members each 6 months on progress over that 2-year period. And then in the 6-month interim, and then we bring an end of year report. And so that's exactly what this does, is bring you a report which is included as one of the appendices there, which gives a summary of what we have achieved over the past year. And then we look at an implementation plan for the upcoming year. The thing I really wanted to highlight is a bit of a shift in approach that I think we've been wanting to make in the way that we think about the implementation of being an anchor institution. So for us, as an anchor institution, it feeds very much into the language that you've been using as you've set your priorities for this next 3 years, and the way you've been talking more generally about the role that we can play as partners. And that is partly to think about being able to get co-investment into work that we're doing, but also to recognise that there are other ways of actually being a partner. And so that may well be as a broker, as a facilitator, as an enabler alongside others. And that language, I think, has been coming through loudly and strongly. Like I say, when you set your strategic objectives for your 10 years and your priorities, when we've been in the long-term plan context for that time. And that's what we've really tried to have a think about when it comes to the way that we behave as an anchor institution. We are one of the major players in our district and sub-region, and there is an opportunity for us to work alongside a number of other key organisations who are also here for the long term to make a difference for our communities. What you'll see in the implementation plan for next year is proposed that rather than having very detailed actions, it does actually try and lift us up to think, how are we acting in a strategic way? And obviously some of those key initiatives that will be coming will be about the way that the council participates in a Head Start program. It will be about the way that we continue to partner with iwi and deliver on their aspirations and think about, well, what does it mean to actually enable those outcomes to be achieved. So that I think that deliberate shift is mirrored by some of those changes in our operating environment, not just because we'll have local government reform coming, but we'll also have changes to the way that we need to develop a regional spatial plan and therefore think regionally and behave regionally in the way that we think about how do we line up and plan and invest in what's actually required. So that approach as an anchor institution is what is intended to be reflected here, and that's and that comes, I think, to the way of thinking about it. The way that we have behaved as an anchor institution, the direction from the get-go from elected members has been that this is not about what we do, it's about the way that we do it. And that's, again, echoed very much in sort of partnerships discussions that you've had. So that's the intent behind this work. Reporting on the previous year, we've achieved, we've achieved a number of those initiatives that we set out to last year. The one initiative that, and this is a discussion that we have had a little bit outside before the committee meeting, that we haven't achieved is progressing with the economic wellbeing strategy, which was drafted and alongside climate change, was one that was going to be packaged up to engage with the community. It's one where my recommendation is that this is a place where our operating environment has actually changed significantly, and my recommendation is that we don't pursue that draft economic and wellbeing strategy in its current form. And so we haven't gone out for consultation this past financial year. I'd like to just speak to that specifically. So from what I see in the way, compared to a year ago when this was identified, is that in that time what we have seen is that the Regional Council, working with the input of economic development advisors from the territorial authorities, including Joy Mickelson from this council, has been to develop a regional economic development strategy. It was adopted by Waikato Regional Council 2 months ago. It's still not up on their website, which is why I haven't included the link in the papers for you. And I have been harassing staff at the Regional Council asking them to publish the report so you can actually see it. But what I have done is include in the committee report what the 6 strategic priorities are from that economic development strategy to give you a flavour of what is being chased down. And the reason for doing that is that I think that when we think about how we want to be able to encourage investment into the region, into our district, which is again one of our organisation priorities and CE KPIs for this year. And when we think about delivering on the growth priorities for this year, we are needing to act in a way that thinks about what is good for Waipa in a sub-regional context, often in that kind of metro and growth kind of context. And so the actions that we take, I think, will we will benefit from the actions that are undertaken in the regional economic development strategy, and we can contribute well to them both ways. And I think that we will be much more impactful for our community if we operate at that more strategic level than if we pursue this really specific initiatives that we had originally included in the draft economic wellbeing strategy. I'm really aware, and again from conversations before, that you haven't had a chance to see the regional economic development strategy, and so what I suggest is that this is something that we actually hold over a decision about what the boost approach is, and that I bring that to the next SPNP meeting for specific consideration. What we would then be able to do is understand how much is the purpose of local government changed. what is going on at a regional scale, and a discussion then starts for you as elected members about what is our role in economic development, and as a result, what would the specific actions be that we might want to actually take, and that's the more sensible way to actually round out that part of the implementation plan.
I've got Roger first and then Claire.
Yeah, thank you. Once again, we're getting into some great discussion today, aren't we? And I think there you've just mentioned a very valid consideration, and that's the Local Government Amendment Bill, which went through its second reading 2 weeks ago. And so it's very close to actually going through its third and becoming law. And that, of course, specifically identifies a move away from the 4 well-beings. Now, you've mentioned that the purpose of local government is going to change possibly the focus of our economic wellness strategy, but surely it's going to change the focus of this particular anchor institution strategic document, because there's no doubt about it, when you look at that diagram that's in your report, right in the very bullseye of that, it actually identifies the 4 community well-beings as the focus of the document. So is that document coming back to us for us to reconsider in terms of the overall purpose of local government?
I had not anticipated that it would, but I'll obviously take the direction of elected members. From my point of view, one very specific comment and left back out. In the draft, in the bill, economic development remains a function of local government. So we aren't moving away from that. And so I think, again, there's still a relevant conversation to have about, well, what does that mean and look like in our context? So it does, and that it plays into the bigger question for you around whether the anchor institution framework remains valid. From my point of view, it absolutely remains valid for 2 reasons. Specifically, although we're seeing the change in the purpose of the Local Government Act and the specificity about some of those activities, actually the core purpose around that placemaking is the unique value proposition of local government remains absolutely key. And we're seeing that even through the government's proposals around Head Start, that they can absolutely recognise that local placemaking and local representation remains absolutely critical. And that's exactly what you've heard from every council around the country. And the work of the sector as a whole has absolutely understood that local government is here to stay, even if the exact form changes. And so that role that we play as an anchor institution remains absolutely valid, even if the focus within that might change. And I think that's why, for me, I'd sort of say it's not what we do, it's how we do it that makes the difference. And that's what the anchor institution framework really gives us.
I think I agree with you what you said. Sorry. But I think possibly, as you say, reviewing the way that we put it into the strategic document may be necessary to bring that in line with what the legislative requirement is. I'm not saying we stop doing things. I'm just saying that the document may need to be revised to be in line with legislation.
Thanks, Roger. Claire and then Shane.
Thanks. It's really good to discuss it. So I agree that it still remains a useful document. And I would be concerned about us having to collect up all the policies and strategies that we've developed over the time as Waipa District Council and having to go through a process. Should we change this? Should we keep it? Should we throw it out? If the broader amalgamation proceeds. I think it's probably going to be much more efficient to accept that these documents were developed at a point in time and they still have something to contribute, but obviously we would have to review just how that works in the broader context that we're operating in. Yeah. I think I take the point that it's got the 4 well-beings in there, but I'm also mindful that it's important to take that broader view when you're thinking about economic well-being. And it was developed as part of Ahuaki, which is our spatial plan, and that will probably go through to the higher level with the RMA reforms as well. So, you know, I'd be reluctant to just say, oh, it's irrelevant now. Yeah. So I think that'd be really good. I just wanted to comment on your description of the regional economic development plan. Yeah, I am really keen to see that. I was disappointed that elected members hadn't had a chance to decide whether or not they should review that our own wellbeing strategy and what to do about that. I was looking forward to it being consulted on with our community, but I accept things have changed in that. So I'm really strongly in support of your suggestion that it comes back to another SPNP committee and we look at both of them and work out what's the best way forward. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Claire. Shane?
Just in terms of principle, so it was disappointing that we as elected members had seen the strategy and decided, yes, it's okay, let's consult with it. And then it was decided not to. I would have thought that in terms of process, that we would have been involved in that decision, and then we would have been involved in understanding the logic of it in terms of the regional economic strategy overtaking it. So that's just one point I want to make. It's the principle of the whole thing. The second thing is I'm very, the Anchor Institute concept is very, very important to us because it actually sets the foundations for customer satisfaction, because they know, you know, what we're doing, how we're reacting with people. And it's not about giving organisations monies, etc. It's how to give them a hand up, how to support them. And we had some examples of that just the other day when we talked about Mangatautri, you know, finding funding methods for them, etc., assisting them in that particular area. You know, we know that we've got issues with trying to get industrial people into Hautapu and Tiomuru, that, you know, what can we do to attract people to the Waipa? There's tourism things that we could be doing. We have community advisors out in the community. What the hell are they doing and how does that tie up with our strategy? So when I look at this implementation plan, to me, it just lacks any critical thinking in terms of strategy, etc. And I would be throwing it in the rubbish bin and starting again, is my view, but that's my view. So,
Wrong view.
And we've had a discussion about this previous to this meeting, and I think you're on the same page.
Would you take that as a statement and carry on, or would you like to?
No, I don't need to respond. I think, except I think what the choice is, I think for the committee is to decide whether you want to adopt the implementation plan at all this meeting, whether you want to adopt it, recognising we may, we'll have a discussion at least about economic development next time, and add something about economic development, or like say whether you hold off and consider a strategic approach to the implementation plan as a whole when we put this back in its operating context at the next meeting, and that we don't approve an implementation plan this meeting.
Yep, and I just got one other comment too. Sorry, I missed it with my writing. We also, it lacks consultation with the community. Like, you know, the idea, where's the Chamber's ideas? You know, what do they think our role is in terms of youth and employment and all those sorts of areas too. And so that's very much lacking in that document.
Mayor Mike, and then I'd be happy to get a steer from others on how they're feeling about this, so we can get a good, I'll go to Mayor Mike and then come to you, Claire.
Well, thank you through the chair. I've just got a question. If we didn't pass this today and it was next SPNP, which I'm assuming is probably October, is it? How does that affect anything around LTP, costings, numbers?
It doesn't affect it at all. One thing that elected members have been clear about all the time is that there's no additional funding to be delivering this work.
I guess the other thing with October is we'll get a steer from government where our future lies. So there's no sort of material effect, I'd be happy to support Shane and go, if that's what you're alluding to, let's just tie-ho on this. Also, maybe our other two elected members are back by then also.
How are others feeling about that, leaving it and having a look at it a bit closer and coming back in October? Claire?
Yeah, so I'd be supportive of leaving it. Yeah, I mean, there's important work in there. But you're right, we need to understand, yeah, what the implications are of Head Start, I think, to understand whether or not we should carry on with it. Could I just ask, I wanted to check about the 10 largest suppliers. It's to do with monitoring and reporting on council spend and the benefits. I know that that wasn't achievable initially because we didn't have the reporting systems in place, but that is also going to be quite helpful, I suppose, in the longer term if we do carry on in some form or other, you know, as a more localised entity that's looking after our communities in some way. We're probably going to want to use local suppliers and things like that. So I was kind of hoping that that local contribution KPI is going to be able to be functional.
Would you mind if I just go and grab my phone, because I've got an email sitting in my inbox from Adele about this morning, because I asked her exactly this question, and then I won't misrepresent what she said.
Thanks very much. While Katie's getting that sorted, anyone else wanted to support?
I mean, I broadly support, you know, holding off until we've got more pieces of the jigsaw puzzle.
Okay, okay, thank you.
All right, so to summarise, Adele saying that she can certainly provide some statistics on the number of tenders issued over the last year, which included the local contribution component. And I think it would be good just to work with you offline, and then we could circulate that information to people, because then she would just like to know, are we referring to contractors or suppliers, or, you know, I mean, there's just a few details about that that we can clarify so that we can then actually circulate that information to you afterwards. And then she goes on to talk about some of those local benefits that we can obviously include, and certainly anecdotally about the positive feedback that we've been receiving from local suppliers and contractors, the approach that we've been taken.
Yeah, really happy to work offline with you on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been I suppose a priority that the service delivery chairs have wanted to make sure that we can report really well to our communities on that policy we've got for local content. Yeah.
Okay. Katie, do you have more that you want to speak on? Otherwise, we can just go to the recommendations. What we can do is just move A and B, and we'll just leave C out completely. Should we do that? Right. So we will receive Katie's report on the Anchor Institution's annual report, and we will note the achievements made in implementing that Anchor Institution framework for the 25-26 year. So Shane is going to move. Can I have a second, please? Dale Marie, thank you. All in favour, please say aye. And any against? Great. Okay, carried. Right, that brings us to our lunch break, and we will come back now at 12:45. Thanks, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us again to SPMP, and we have Daisy with us. She is going to present the Strategic Planning and Policy Committee Work Programme update. Thanks, Daisy.
Well, thank you, Jo. Kia ora koutou. I think I've met a lot of you before, but I'll just quickly introduce myself to those who haven't met me before. So my name's Daisy and I am a strategic policy advisor within the strategy team. I'm also the LTP project coordinator within the LTP team as well, which is probably where a majority of you have seen me before. This report presents the regular strategic planning and policy work program update. The attached appendix shows you the changes that have been made to the program since June. Following today's meeting, I will accept all of those track changes and that document will become the new baseline for the next meeting. I'm happy to take the report as read. You've probably noticed that the bulk of the updates relate to the long-term plan, along with some additions for the growth strategy and strategic growth management program. As those updates are coming up next, I'd suggest holding any detailed questions on those until those items are up. That said, I just want to briefly note a couple of changes to the LTP work program in my role as LTP project coordinator. I'm aware that the groups of activities item has been removed, as no formal council decision is required. This is because the structure is mandated by central government and will instead be communicated to elected members through On the Radar. That's expected at this stage sometime before September. You'll also notice that community halls have been removed from the August workshop and it hasn't been re-added. That was a blunder from me, sorry. But it is currently planned to be considered in September alongside the revenue and financing policy. I also just wanted to mention a couple of things missing from the program. We will be doing some reform monitoring from October, and the anchor institutions item discussed earlier in this meeting will also come back in October. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions or feedback on the work program itself.
Thanks, Daisy. Any questions for Daisy on the work program ahead? Good to see our public transport item is coming in that workshop. That'll be good. Claire?
Yes, thanks, Daisy. I was going to ask about the gambling policy review, because I recall previously we've had a social impact report done. So if we do manage to do it, will there still be time to get that social impact report done, or would we have to rely on the previous one?
Yeah, so Katie, feel free to add to this, but I believe you would have seen on your agenda in May a refreshed social impact assessment, which was done in April. However, we're currently considering how the gambling policy review aligns with Head Start priorities and available resourcing.
In general, I think we're really trying to take the direction from council to make sure that we are focusing on our priorities, and if there are things that actually where there's less value in actually progressing with it, then we actually just need to clear the decks and really focus on those things that are priorities. So at the moment, when we're doing that across the board, and that'll be particularly influenced by whether we are accepted into the Head Start pathway or not. Yeah.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally understand.
So at the moment, we've deferred making that decision until September, when we should understand what's happening with Head Start.
Great. Any further questions, comments? No? Are you folks happy to go to our recommendation now? Okay, let's do that. Right, so we are receiving Daisy's report, Strategic Planning and Policy Committee Work Programme 2026. Can someone to move my mic, and Claire will second. All in favour, please say aye. Any against? Oh, great, carried. Thank you. And now we're going to welcome Karen on our growth strategy. Nice to see you. Welcome.
Kia ora koutou, everybody. So today's update is an update on the growth strategy refresh. I thought I would just highlight a few key points before taking questions. So the report provides an update on the refresh, including progress to date, the expected timing, as well as touch points that elected members can expect along the process. The project remains on track with the first stage around evidence and insights complete. The growth principles adopted by council and clear strategic direction from you around managing growth which is in place, and this has set a really good foundation for the strategy. So you recall from the workshops that we did across May and in June as well, that the evidence that we had done shows that Waipa is very well placed for growth with sufficient residential and industrial capacity within existing planned areas. And so that means that this refresh is not so much focused on identifying new areas for growth, but more about how we will manage the impacts of growth and a framework for managing that and working with our partners. As well as ensuring we've got a really strong voice as we head into, strong Waipa voice as we head into the regional spatial planning exercise, which is coming up the lift. We are now working on targeted engagement with iwi and our key stakeholders and partners. So that's going well. We've put the invitations out, and we've also been working very collaboratively with our neighbours at Waikato District Council. They're also doing their growth strategy refresh. And so we're working side by side and seeing where we can do things together to save time and effort, etc. So that's really good. Looking ahead, we're working towards a draft strategy in December for you, and we will bring for a decision, around putting the draft strategy out for consultation in early 2027 alongside the LTP consultation for adoption in June 2027. And we're currently working really hard to find a date in November where we can come to a workshop with you to run through the draft and receive your feedback. So I will take the report as read and answer any questions.
Thank you. I just had one from Councillor Kempson, just super quickly. He had that considering the growth strategy won't be adopted until June 27, but the financial strategy is due at the end of the year, December. What guidance will be used for growth decisions in the meantime? Is Growth Principle 5 already being applied, or will it only apply once the strategy is adopted? And then I'll come to Roger.
Yeah, so I guess what we did by getting the council adoption of the growth principles on 24th of June was for that very purpose, so that we can apply those. And we expect over the coming months that we get a really strong position that we can apply to the LTP. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Katie?
No, I think there's two parts to the answer, isn't it? So we, in conjunction, we've also, as an input to this work, already confirmed those growth projections and then the industrial projections as well. So again, that's been provided as a base for the long-term plan. So Karen's working really strongly alongside the long-term plan team to make sure that all those growth components are actually woven into the right places for the long-term plan.
Thank you. Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. Thank you for this. And as we know, we had that workshop and that was really, really good, and some very good information shared there. I understand that it's a refresh. This existing document projected 33 years ahead then to 2050. In terms of the refresh, are we still keeping that end date of 2050, or are we projecting 33 years from now, which will be basically 2060? So are we still keeping a 30-year window? So we're moving the 30-year window.
Yes,
so we
are.
will be refreshing the end date from 2050 to 2060.
Yeah, it's technically 2057, but 2060 does sound better.
Yes, we will. And I think it's really important to do so that it can inform things like the infrastructure strategy, which need a 30-year time frame as well.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, I agree with that. I just want a clarification that we're still keeping that planning window. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
And that lines up with development levies too.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I'm pleased to see the growth strategy being renewed. I guess I'm keen to understand about the industrial land situation and then maybe new features that I think would be important to include. So I think there's a comment that we've got enough industrial land, but I would like some special focus on Te Awamutu, because I recall some reporting we got about the price increases for industrial land, and there were quite sharp increases in Te Awamutu, which I thought indicated that there might be a bit of a shortage. And I think there's some constraints with some of the existing zone stuff. Yeah, so it'd be good if a bit more work could be done on that, because I do want to make sure that this community, is well served. That does have the capacity to take up more industrial businesses wanting to set up here. And then for the new stuff, firstly, wastewater treatment systems for Pirongia and Ohaupo, would that be part of this work? We'd like to consider that or not? And I don't know how Waikato Waters fits in either. But should we signal it in our strategic documents?
We need to think about where the infrastructure strategy will sit alongside the growth strategy. And how much detail the growth strategy goes into for that versus infrastructure strategy setting out what's needed. But also how we work with Waikato Waters to plan and sequence growth and enable growth. That's something that we should very clearly set out in the strategy.
So I'm really keen to get a strong message sent to Waikato Waters, perhaps through this document, that it's something that we see as important for those communities. Because I think without that direction, they might not pick it up or give it much weight. It's been talked about for quite a long time, actually, and I still don't know whether or not it is a viable option. But if it's not in this iteration, I'm worried that it might not possibly get in any. And the same comment applies for renewable energy. So while I appreciate that this strategy is often about population increase or business increase, but it makes it a lot livable if we do provide well or plan for renewable energy, like solar or wind, and then the storage of like batteries and things like that at a community level.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if it's, if this is the right place to put it. I'd love to see it included.
It is, that's useful feedback. One of the things that has come up through our collaboration with Waikato District Council, particularly around the use of rural growth, is the growth of things like solar farms, renewable energy, data centres. So that sort of growth that can take up that productive land and where that fits, and therefore what the response is to that. So I know Rotorua District Council has been doing some work on rural, so there's a study that's underway. So and there's a cross-council group that's been set up around rural to understand how we might respond to that. So that's good.
And I just add that I think this is a good opportunity to think about what's important for Waipa as we go into the regional spatial plan, which Karen's already mentioned. This is obviously an input to that work. The regional spatial plan will also pick up on things like the regional energy strategy that's recently been completed, and the regional economic development strategy, which picks up on on the energy components that you've mentioned, and so where that needs to be mapped. And I think that's the more that we have an understanding of what that looks like for us, means that we're actually in a strong position to be part of those conversations when we get into the regional spatial plan.
Mike.
Thanks for the chair. Just a consideration too, and just where's it factored in, fast track applications, of which we don't have too many, but we do have fast track applications. Where do they fit into this? Because, for instance, I met with some folks the other day, and, it's a significant amount of hues, 300 or 400. If it comes off, where does that fit into this document?
So
first question, I've got another one.
This is the new thing that needs to be captured very clearly in our strategy, because that has changed since 2017. So those decisions are not made by council. We can expect that those types of development will happen. So we have our planned growth areas where we have said this is the best place for growth, but those developments will happen and they will come. So our growth strategy needs to say, well, what is our strategic response to that? What do we do? What if it's undermining our existing areas? What's our response to that? So we need to work through that, and that's something that we will be wanting guidance from you on as well, in terms of what that response is. It's tricky.
part of it is no cost. I'm sure it'll be, but no cost to us. Right, and the other, and it's sort of in line with that really around industrial growth. And you sort of say that you've identified some areas here, Matos Edgerton Drive and Titanium Park and Hotapu, etc. And Claire, you just mentioned about over this side of a District 2. I mean, that to me is largely supply and demand. And so with private plan changes, you know, and of course, if private plan changes come through, they need to be funded by those putting them forward, not by council. So it's really important. But again, you know, we can have plan growth cells, but things will happen over the next 33 years or 30 years, whatever it's going to be. So I guess is to be aware of that. They may happen sooner, they may happen later, but you know, a plan is only as good as not far down the track, basically.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, back to you, Karen, if you have anything else to add, or you're
I do
happy
not.
to leave it there?
I do not,
Any-
but we'll report back
Okay.
to the next committee.
Okay, any further questions for her before she vacates? Oh, great, okay, let's go to our resolutions there. We're just going to receive her report titled Growth Strategy Refresh Project Update. Shane's going to move and Roger will second. All in favour? Any against? Oh, great, carried, thank you. Okay, and now we're welcoming Bridget for our LTP project update. Hi, Bridget.
Kia ora. Welcome to our LTP status report. Now, this period, it's a little more green, a little more on track and a little less amber or at risk than last period. So that's really pleasing for everybody. I'm going to take it as read, but I did have 2 additions I was going to comment on. Firstly, we mention in the report that finance are scoping a new affordability measure. I think you'll all be quite interested in this. In essence, and I'm certainly not the expert, this is a discussion support tool at this point. It's a spatial map at suburb level, looking at the median household income to rates ratio, residential households only. And we're really intending for this to be information to support discussion that we'll have in September in conjunction with the financial strategy and our revenue and finance policy. So that's really nice to see that progressing. The second addition, I just wanted to do a quick shout out. You'll see that we have reported this period against elected member satisfaction as one of our project metrics. Shout out to those of you who took the time to complete that survey, and a gentle request next time, please, to everyone to do that, just because the feedback is so useful for us. So this time we've taken from the feedback the importance of showing how everything comes together in the LTP and through the various workshops, and also we're strengthening the financial context because that came through really strongly in your feedback. So thank you for that. Any questions?
Start with Shane.
The elected members survey, what percentage of elected members responded to that?
Ooh.
And the ones that didn't respond, it'd be interesting to understand if there's any reason why they didn't respond. Is there ways we can improve it so that next time they do respond? So it's a question to elected members who didn't respond.
Can I jump to elected members' defence who didn't respond and say that we sent it out because we had our last workshop immediately before your recess. So a few people were able to fill it in before recess, but a couple of people were already jumping on planes, heading somewhere away. And so we had a reminder when you came back, but again, people were coming back in. So I think the timing was really tricky for elected members.
Thank you, Katie. Oh, no, well, more than half responded, thank you. Yeah, can't remember exact numbers, but there was, yeah.
9 out of 13. Okay, well, that's something we can discuss amongst ourselves perhaps in our EM time about a strategy there. Ian had a couple of questions too. He said that the LTP assumes amalgamation in the first 3 years when no decision has been made. Shouldn't we plan on the basis that amalgamation won't happen unless it's confirmed?
That's an interesting statement.
Yeah.
As an LTP project manager, I'm not assuming per se that amalgamation will happen, but that is certainly the way we are looking at being well prepared and a lens that we're looking at our work through. Katie, would you like to add?
I was trying to remember what the significant assumption was that we made about this, because for the rest of the reform program, we actually assumed that there wasn't significant change with the rest of the things like the resource management reform, because it was too early to know that content. So I think we should go back and just double check what the significant assumption is that council of actually elected members have already made. And
I'll send it through.
I don't know off the top of my head for us about that.
Roger.
This is only my perception, but I've got a feeling that we decided that it was important to actually register the longer term requirements of the LTP, so it established what our, if you like, wish list was going forward to any future regional plan. That's only my perception of what we...
Right, Claire.
Yeah. Thanks, Bridget. I wanted to ask about that depreciation for growth assets question. There wasn't any direct reference to it. I just want to check that work is being done on it, and I understood it would also require getting some legal opinions or advice, from I guess experts in the field, whether it's Auditor General or somewhere. But Katie did say the work is continuing, but
Yes.
you can give me any more
Yes, and I can't really give you any more detail than that. I'm not the expert in the area, but I understand the work is continuing, and we will start to see some of that work with the financial strategy coming through in September.
But what we might do is at the workshops next week, particularly the second day of the workshops has got a strong financial component, and perhaps we can just ask Matt to speak and give you an update about where it's at, to hopefully give you a degree of comfort, and then you'll understand what is coming to you in September.
Yeah, and I'd just like to make a little comment about the elected member survey. It was quite entertaining to see the measures, including the middle one, which should have been neutral, but it was actually spelt neural.
And I'm so pleased and thankful that we have you looking in detail at these documents. Thank you.
I thought
Councillor.
it was quite tongue in cheek actually.
Mayor Mike.
Oh, no, it was just really support through the chair, Roger's comment. I think there was a few people, I remember Monty saying it, but definitely about, this long-term plan. It's probably the most important one that we're actually going to do. So, yeah, just to support what Roger said.
Thanks. Back to you, Bridget, if there's anything further.
No, I have nothing further.
Any further questions for Bridget or discussion? No. Okay, let's go to our recommendation, which is just to receive Bridget's report, the long-term plan project update. Shane's going to move, Claire's going to second. All in favour? Aye. Any against? No, carry, great. Right, now we're going to move into a public excluded part of this meeting. So Marcus is going to move and Dale Marie is going to second. Thank you very much. All in favour? And any against? No.